Okay, she's recording. Okay, welcome everyone. Now, how did everyone do? I got to see Nancy. How about if you show everyone your piece, just so we can all, whoops, hold on, let me spotlight you. I love those colors, Nancy. I really do. Very cool. Thank you. Okay, Caitlin, could you show us your piece, please?
Sure can. Hopefully this shows up.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
I think it's your background, your
Well-
blur is interfering with that.
Let me unblur.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully that works.
Yep, it does. Oh, that's gorgeous.
It's sort of a blue and white combo.
Yep, very nice. Good. Thank you. And Joyce, can you show us what you've been doing? Okay. Just to your left. That's good.
Oh, nice.
Very nice. We like our diamonds. Yeah, we like our diamonds. So what our plan tonight is, we'll answer any questions that you might have. And let me just take everyone back to gallery view so I can see everyone here. So tonight we're going to, I'll find out if you have any questions, where do you go from here? Also, how to finish this off, how to take it off of off the loom, and how do I finish it? So let me switch cameras here. Okay. Let me turn that on so it's a little bit brighter. There we go. Okay.
Excuse me for 1 second. So Bonnie is unable to join, so we'll send her the recording. So
Okay.
you've got your group for tonight.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, let me go back to share screen. Okay, so the piece I was working on last night, I have taken it off the loom. Before we take it off the loom though, we do need to add another row of size 11s, and that's what's going to fit in these clasps. Okay, so to do those size 11s, we'll come back to that. I did another one here this afternoon. So I've got a pattern here, and I've got some size 11 seed beads. It doesn't matter whether you use Toho or Miyuki. The Tohos are a little wider, so sometimes it's a little easier to handle. So I'm just going to puddle these out. And I'm going to take the lastmost thread. On my last row, I finished it, and then I just did a half hitch knot, and all that was taking my thread around that last warp and taking it through the loop. And that's just to keep this from popping open. And I've done that on both ends. Okay, so now I need to add my anchor beads, and no one will see those anchor beads. They're going to sit right inside of the clasp. So I'm going to put my thread on, or thread my needle here. Okay. And I have a good length of thread because I don't want it too short, but I also don't need yards and yards of it. So I do have 13 spaces. I'm going to pick up, I don't need technically more than one, but I don't want it to sort of get too small. Actually, Nancy, you might want to just reduce one of the beads on this, and that will actually help reduce into the sides. So if you happen to have a narrower clasp than what your piece is, you can leave beads out of this, and then we'll just simply tie those in, and those knots will slide in. So I'm going to pick up 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus a couple extra. So I've got 15 there. Sorry, that's my budgie who is sitting on my shoulders, demanding that I pay attention to him. Now I have picked up more than the 13. So a couple of these spaces are going to have 2 in. It does not matter which spaces have 2. My goal is to keep the width consistent. If you do want it narrower, just put 1 in each space, and that will tighten it down. I'm going to switch hands, and just like I've done all the way through, pull it through. And this is where it's really important to get these up. Come on. Oh, you were behaving so well for me this afternoon. There we go. Okay, so I am pushing up just to make sure that my thread, my needle is going to go over top the warps. Come on. Right to the end. There we go. And yes, you do want to make sure that your needle doesn't come out. Okay, so let's try this again. Murphy's Law is joining me tonight, I guess. Mr. Murphy, please don't bother. It's okay. Not only did he decide to visit, he's got his antics on tape. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'll just do 1 extra. It won't be quite so tight then. Okay, so in one space I have 2 beads, all the rest have 1. Does not matter which have 2, although it's easier if it's on the inside. Switch fingers. Get in there. Okay. Keep that in place, and don't unthread the needle again. Go back through. Okay. Okay. So that's all it needs. I'm going to do a 1/2 hitch knot just to secure this end of the beadwork. And I'm holding it there just so this doesn't spring too far open. It's not going to spring any further really than the width of the beadwork. So I'm really not too worried. And just to make sure it's not going to go anywhere, I'm going to do a second one. Okay. So that last piece is on. I'm just going to take my thread through the top of the pattern beadwork, just so that when I am tying things together, this thread is out of the way. We will weave all these threads in. Okay, this end is done. Don't worry that it's really not tight. It's not going to matter when we tie this. Okay, we are going to do the same thing with this side. And again, pick up 14, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay. And again, putting them underneath. And just like on the other end, one space is going to have two. It does not have to be in the same space as what's on the other end. And pull through. Keep these other threads out of the way. Okay, and then back through over the warps.
Stupid thing.
Okay, that's together. I'm going to do a couple more half hitches on this side just to secure it. Okay, and again, I'm going to take my thread through the top layer of the pattern beadwork. That's just to get it away from the side or the end here. Okay, so that is together. That's all we need to do at this point. Now, keep in mind that your threads have been under tension, and depending on the threads that you're using, your threads may have some stretch and may not. So depending on what you're using, you may need to let it rest for a bit, just so that any stretch has a chance to relax. So to take this off, you need a sharp pair of scissors. And I'm going to, let me bring this up just a little bit. I'm going to cut on the back. And I'm going to hold this against me, and I'm going to bend this so that there is some slack in here, like that. Because when I cut it, this whole thing is going to spring open. So I'm just going to hold it. I'm just putting a little bit of slack in there. And now I'm cutting the threads close to the nubs because I want as much thread as possible. It has unsprung, and I'm just taking the threads off the other end. Come on. There. So the one thing about using the NYMO thread is that there is no stretch. And as you can see, it hasn't bunched up at all. Just a reminder, when things do bunch up, this one I had done with a thread that actually has some stretch. So here you can see just how smooth that is. This one isn't smooth. And what I did was take it off the loom and then tied this before I gave it a chance to relax. If this had any kind of bumpiness to it, I could smooth it out simply by expanding this along. Okay, because the only knots we have been tying are when we started and stopped. So the knots will slide along, and you can just flatten it out, smooth it out with your fingers, and then let it rest. So this one has had a chance to rest, and the one end, this will move around because it's not tied off yet. So this one end is where I've cut it, and they have all the loose, the ends. This one is the end that hasn't been cut, so it's still got the loops. I'm going to give it a haircut, leaving on as much thread as I can, and this much can be discarded. Okay. Most people are terrified of this point. Like, I don't know what to do with all these ends. Well, it's actually not crazy. So what we're going to do is to do what's called a surgeon's knot. I'm actually going to modify it a little bit. And let me bring this down so you can see better what I'm doing. Okay, the other thing you want is a little bit of either some hypo cement or clear nail polish. Clear nail polish works great. And, you know, you don't have to worry about getting that little teeny tiny stopper back onto the hypo cement. There's nothing worse than that. So I'm just going to loosen this off. Yesterday what I was doing, I had a big gob of it on my mat, and it's like, no. So all we're going to do, I'm just going to grab something here just to help separate the threads. So we're going to work with 2 threads at a time. This is just a null that I'm picking up. Now, there's different ways of ending your beadwork. If you are putting this onto a piece of leather that you want to stitch onto something, or onto a piece of fabric, or back it with some ultra suede, what you can do is put some double-sided tape on here and bend it back and not use a regular clasp at all. It would look like that. And the double-sided tape would be behind here, holding all the threads, and it would stay tucked in and secure because you're putting it onto something else. The other thing you can do is to actually take thread and weave it back and forth, so that you have a piece of weaving, and then cover that with glue and use a sort of a ribbon clasp. And the ribbon clasp looks like that. Okay. You can also just use it with a bit of fabric. The one thing about these is that they don't close really tight. So you can, once you can tie it off just like we're doing here. And this is just a piece of ultra suede that I folded over. This works because it pinches around the beads, but because the beads could be fairly thick like these are, sometimes this is really loose. The other thing I don't really like about these is that I don't want to damage the threads of the warps. So this is not my preferred method, but as I say, there's many ways of finishing this off. So let's go back to here. So we're going to work with 2 threads at a time. That's a thread, these 2 threads first. And we do have 14 threads. So for every 2, I am left-handed, so I naturally tend to start with my left hand, but this works either way. Left side over the right side, 2 unders. 1, 2. And pull it down. Don't over tighten it. Okay, you want the knot to be on top of the seed beads, and you don't want to pull the warp so that you get a rippling in here. Okay, so we started with the left side before. And now it's right side over the left side and 2 unders. And when I pull that down, because I've done 2 unders, that's holding itself onto there. So let me do that again, and we're going to do that all the way along here. Okay, let's start with the right side this time. So the typical surgeon's knot, usually the first set of knots has the 2 unders and not the second. For this, I found when I was doing it, it needed the second 2 unders to actually hold itself. Otherwise, I found the second set of knots would come undone. So right side, let me get my fingers out of the way. Right side over the left side, 1 under, 2 unders. No, that's 2 unders. Okay. You can do this on gifts too with the 2 unders, and you don't need anyone there to put their finger down. Butchers use this too. 2 unders and bring it down. Okay, That's holding. See, it's not coming apart. Next two, I find either using an awl or a needle just helps pick up the threads a little easier. Okay. So whichever side you want to start, one side over the other side with 2 unders, like that. Pull it down. Then the other side over the other, again with 2 unders. And sometimes these threads are just a little hard to hold. Okay. And again, this is one where we have 2 beads in the space. We're going to treat it exactly the same way. Make sure that you're only having the threads there. No, there we go. Okay, so one side over the other side with 2 unders. Tighten it down. Then the other side over and 2 unders. Okay, and the next 2 strings. Okay, 1, 2 unders. Then the other side. Come on. Over and 2 unders. Okay, next 2. I want to be persnickety tonight. Okay. Okay. 1 under, 2 unders.
Oh, you stupid thing.
And the other side and 2 unders. Oops. Trying not to let them twist, but as I say, we're going to secure them. Okay, and my last 2. Now, if you had an odd number, obviously you're not going to work it out 2 by 2 by 2. If you had an odd number, then use the string that's hanging on the one side and tie it off to that single one string if you have an odd number. So 1, there. And there we go. Okay, so we have tied off all of the warp threads. Like that. And now I want to secure them. I don't want them, even though we have done secure knots, I'm just going to come through and dab the knots. I don't need a huge amount, just enough that when I give it a haircut, it's not going to come undone. Okay, so I've just applied a little bit of nail polish. As I say, you can use hypo cement or anything else. Fabric glue would work. You could apply it then with a toothpick or something like that. And then I'm just going to let this sit to dry. So while that's drying, I can do the other end. Any questions so far? How are you guys doing? That good? Okay, we're good? Okay. So again, let's get these other threads. Now, once I've got the ends on, then I will be weaving in all these ends. So, okay, Indy, back to your cage. Go on. Okay, so we're going to do the exact same things. Now, if you didn't do the second under on the second string, let me show you what would happen. So I'm just going to do one under there. It tightens, but then it begins to loosen up. So by the time I'm moving it around, get to this end, this would actually undo that easily. So I'm going to do this, the second, that's why I do the second under. So one under, two under. Okay, and we just move it along. And the space that has two beads in it, we just treat it like all the other ones. Okay, oops. It's funny how finicky thread can be to work with. There we go. Sort of wonder how surgeons do it. Okay. Now, if you find it's moving all over your board like this one is, what you can certainly do is put a pin into it just so it doesn't slide on you. You know, that is, because that can be very irritating as well. Okay, so see, all of a sudden it stops sliding on me. Okay, so we just continue along the row here. Okay. There. Oops. Okay, then the last one. So how are you doing there, Nancy? Are you, I guess you're tying it off, or?
Yeah, I'm just tying it off. I was a little bit behind. My 11s were giving me a hard time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's not a race. Don't worry. I'm not judging.
So sorry, do we tie one knot per or two?
Two. Yeah.
And then the second one, we go the opposite way, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this is tied off now. So Joyce, I know you had some issues last week with the weaving. Did it work out better for you the second time?
Yes, it did. After I kind of calmed down, took a few deep breaths, and it got to working.
Oh, good.
Now I haven't done this. I'm watching you do this first, so I guess my question is a few questions. One of them is the length of the bracelet is going to be a little less than the circumference of your wrist, correct?
It depends how
want-
much ease you want in your bracelet. Generally,
Like a
I
half an
do.
inch?
I do mine. Yeah, I do mine about almost the width of the bracelet because these. Okay, so I've done that. I'm just going to let that glue dry there. So this is one that I have finished.
All right.
The easiest way of determining how long you need your beadwork to be is to figure out what kind of a clasp you're going to use.
Okay.
So the distance of what this takes up is what you need to add to the amount of your beadwork.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So,
That should do. Now,
okay.
the other question I have
Yeah.
too is, when you're doing that extra row, when you're doing your seed bead row.
Yeah.
For example, when I started out, I have a short string. So what I'm going to want to do is just tie off another string going through the row of beads, tie it off, and then add, correct?
Yeah, you can, or if the string that you have there isn't quite long enough to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, you can do that.
All right.
Yep.
And then for example, the last row that I have it is, so tie it off first and then go ahead and add the extra row of beads like I would normally.
Yes. Yeah. The reason
No
I
extra
tie it off
reinforcement.
just with that half hitch knot is just so it doesn't spring back on me.
Okay.
And it gives a
Alright.
better edge. Okay,
Okay.
good. Okay, so this side is dry now. So I'm just going to lift up my warp threads, get all the other threads out of the way. And with sharp scissors, and that's why I have these thread on this. Let's get these other threads out of the way. There. I'm going to give it a haircut. I'm going to leave just a little bit of, what's the lack of a better word, stubble over the knot, like that. Okay, so the longer piece can go out. I'm just going to, if I need to find just to trim it a little bit, I don't want to cut into the knots. That's what I do not want to do. So there's the clasp. Let's bring it down here. And this slides right in. And as you can see, it accommodates those knots. It will accommodate the size 8s, but it was really, really, really tight to get the knots in there. So that's why I take it down to a size 11. And those size 11 beads now anchor it within here. So now all that's necessary, I'm just going to grab a pair of pliers here. And you can use any pliers, flat nose, chain nose. And I'm going to bend this down. Flat. And sometimes I have to actually, there it goes, it went flat. So that is finished. Now, all these other threads, I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes, let the other end dry. Let's just move those out of the way. Is that I can put these threads back on my needle, one at a time. And remember, we either tied an overhand knot to start or tied a half hitch knot when we finished. And at this point, I can just simply go in and out of the beads. I don't have to worry if I'm going over the warp or under the warp. And I don't have to go all the way along, but because this is a grid, I can just simply bounce down to the next. Come on, get in there. Bounce down to the next row in the same space and come up. there's no tension on these threads, so there's no reason for them to come apart. So I'm just going to sort of take it back in a circle. Let it come back on itself. Oops, did I? Okay, just knocked over the nail polish. Okay, the one thing you don't want to do is cut your threads at the end of the row. You'll never get rid of that little stubble. So take your threads out mid-row. It doesn't matter where mid-row, but somewhere within the row, use your sharp scissors and trim it. And that's all you need to do. So here's again where I've started and ended a thread. And I'm going to do that with each and every thread. And I do that after it's rested in case you need to smooth it out. You don't want it to, you don't want your threads to hamper you smoothing anything out. So that's why I do it after the fact. So again, I'm just taking it in to where the thread is. And one thing about these needles is that they bend really, really well. So take that through. I'm just going to extend it down. It can be a little, I won't say it's tight, but it can be a little awkward. There. I'm just going to go back through here again. So I'm taking the threads back around onto itself. There. Okay. And again, cutting it anywhere mid row. So that one's done. And I'm just going to continue doing that to all of these. Now on this one, this is dry now. So we'll just give this one a haircut. Making sure I've just got all the threads that I need. Okay. And again, just with not cutting into the knots. That would not be good. So those can be discarded. If I need to do any trimming, I can trim it now. There. And with the other clasp, I'm going to put it on exactly the same way. And it should slide on without an issue. Sometimes you can only maybe take it only a bead at a time. There. Okay, and then we close this one up the same way. There. Okay. And I'll weave in these ends. So once the ends are woven in, then it's just a matter of attaching your clasp. And depending on the clasp you're using, a couple of jump rings. And in this case, I'll use a lobster clasp there it is. And I'm sure you all know how to open and close jump rings. Can I zoom? No, okay. Pliers on either side, opening at the top, bring one part toward you, one part away. Attach it, put your clasp on one side. And again, pliers on both sides of the jump ring, bring your ends together, making sure that they're lined up and no air there between the ends. Air is an escape route. Okay, one part towards you, one part away. Slide this on. And at this point, depending on the clasp you want to use, because this is a lobster clasp, I could attach a little bit of chain to this end and turn it into an extender chain. So if your beadwork was just a little on the small side, that's one way that you can expand it. Okay. Any questions about that? So how did you guys feel about doing loom work?
Love it.
Did you find it relaxing once you got going with it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's that first row, just to get that first row in there and let it set up.
It's like a crafter's meditation.
It is. You're right. And it is, I mean, it's also satisfying to create your own patterns as well. You know, whether you use graph paper, just, you know, or even if you do counter cross stitch, some of the patterns that are there, because it's all a square grid and those are easily adapted, you know, for things like beadwork or loom work. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing and I'm going to just pause the recording.